Hey, welcome to episode 79 of Tangible Takeaways. I'm Jackson. I'm here with Debbie. What are we going to be cooking today?
We are going to be making my mom's fruit salad.
I am so ready for summer, so ready for the fruit salad vibes. It's going to be great. We've also got some great takeaways from this weekend's message. All that and more on this episode of Tangible Takeaways. I'm a big fruit salad fan.
All right, you're not going to be disappointed.
So if somebody wants to cook along with us today, what do they need on hand?
So I love to have watermelon as the base for my fruit salad.
That's a staple.
Yes. So
do all fruit salads have a base?
You know, you want like a bigger fruit that can kind of take up some of the room in there. Okay. I think to make it look more full, especially if you're going to be making like a larger fruit salad for multiple people.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you use as a base if you weren't going to use watermelon?
You know, I might do like cantaloupe and honeydew, or I would keep my strawberries like whole, maybe not slice them down so big or something like that. Just give it a little more of a base.
This is all new to me, even having a base, and I've just eaten fruit salad before. Okay, so watermelon's the base.
Yes. So yeah, you got to start with a really good watermelon. This watermelon here, you know, it's not really watermelon season, so I was taking a little bit of a risk. Yeah, getting a good watermelon, but you want to listen for one that has, you know, kind of like a hollow sound when you thump it.
Oh, okay.
All right, so that's what the ladies are always doing at the grocery store when you see them picking up and
pat the baby's butt.
Yes, exactly. And then these little marks on here, the little scars, are what I have heard is like a bee sting, and then it's responding to that. So it pulls the sweetness to that spot.
Oh.
So this one should be a pretty sweet watermelon with the, you know, the couple of scars that are here. So we got a watermelon. We have some organic strawberries.
Nice, very nice.
And those ones smell really good. I have raspberries that we're gonna use today, and blueberries.
Okay.
All right, so we got a berry and watermelon fruit salad.
That's pretty fun.
All right.
Okay.
So, are we gonna get going on this?
Yes. What's step one here if we're making this fruit salad?
So I'm gonna grab my cutting board real quick.
Okay. Yeah. I'm getting pretty excited about those strawberries. They look
smell
pretty
them.
good.
They smell really good. Is it all right if I stand for cutting the watermelon?
That's A-okay.
Okay.
This does. It smells fresh picked right here.
Okay. So something, you know, if you're gonna have kids over when you're having watermelon, sometimes I'll use like half the watermelon to make for the fruit salad.
That is such a pro cut right there.
Oh, smells good.
Smells good.
All right.
Okay, we got a good one.
So I'll use half the watermelon to put in the fruit salad, and then the other half I will slice it into little triangles, because sometimes, you know, kids want to be able to eat them, you know, just like with little triangles with the rind still on. Yeah, so.
And what's your technique because I know everybody's got a watermelon cutting technique.
Yeah, so these are the triangles that I typically would do for the kids, but if I'm gonna be making it for the fruit salad, I will just slice down like this.
Okay.
And then I'll go like These are really good knives, so they cut really, really well.
Wow. Okay.
And this one smells really good.
Picking up what you're putting down here. That is a far simpler. You're not looking to scrape every last bit.
These parts for a fruit salad, like you want the sweetest parts, you know, and so okay. So this watermelon does have a lot of seeds in it, even though it said seedless. So your kids might be protesting on that one.
Looking like a lie, right?
Yeah, it does.
Do your kids have high preference related to seeds, no seeds?
You know what? My oldest, Adeline, she doesn't really mind, but my 4-year-old, she won't touch it unless you pick the seeds out. So
I was convinced for a long portion of my childhood that the black seeds were the ones that would grow a watermelon in your stomach. We have a book about that. All right, so I think this will probably be enough for the size that we're making today. Okay. So we've got our base now, and look at that. Look at those sizes there. You know, you got some chunkier sizes because this is a base. Because I know how to make a fruit salad.
Yeah,
you got to have a base.
Fill it up, right?
Okay.
I don't really prefer fruit salads that have like the fruit cut really, really small. That's just my preference.
Yes.
Like I prefer this fruit to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, you don't want to have to be poking around in there with a fork or whatever.
Yeah, and so then the next size thing I would do is the strawberries, right? Because I don't want the strawberries to hide the blueberries and the raspberries.
Getting progressively smaller.
Yes. So I like to do halves on these.
Just having these.
But you could do quarters, you know?
Could do whatever you're feeling
Whatever you're feeling like that day. Thanks, Jackson.
I'm just trying to keep the, the workspace clean here. So is there a method for strawberries like you have a method for watermelon?
So for berries, I always smell the container at the store.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm like, if you can't smell the strawberries, they're probably not going to taste very good.
So that's the strategy.
Yes.
Take a sniff.
You want them to be really red. But then, yeah, I smell the container because, they're always in these plastic containers with holes, and you can smell how good they're going to be. So, yeah. It's really funny because my kids have grocery shopped with me long enough that they have picked up on that. So when I'm unloading groceries, sometimes my kids will sniff the strawberry bin.
So you're passing it on generationally.
Yes. Okay.
And you use watermelon as the base because you are a huge watermelon fan.
I am a huge watermelon fan. When it's watermelon season, we will have a watermelon every week, at least one. And sometimes when they're cheap, I will buy 2.
Wow. And your whole family will be able to go through that with ease. It's not like there's going to be leftovers next week.
Right. We eat through that whole thing. All right. So I'm thinking, those look pretty good. Your
pretty good red combination going on here.
Yes. And then, the blueberries just kind of add.
Is there any value when making a fruit salad? This one's feeling very patriotic. Is there any value in you want like a marinade of the flavors somehow, or like...
I don't know. So I like my fruit salad very fresh.
Yes.
I don't like when it starts to get super juicy and there's like juice pooling in the bottom. Yes. I like it really fresh. I also am not really big on really sour fruit. So like some people like to put like green apples in there or that kind of thing. I'm also not really big on like bananas or fruits that will brown really quickly, right? Yeah. So I like it to be able to stay kind of fresh and crunchy.
I see.
So, do you want to try some?
Yes, I would love to. This is actually kind of getting me in the mood for summer.
All right, I know,
feels like
and it's actually really nice weather out today, finally, right? The snow has melted. Can he see that? Look at this.
Look at that.
Look at that.
That's looking pretty good to me. And why do you call this your mom's fruit salad? Is it because she was kind of your introduction to all things fruit salad?
Yes. So my mom would make fruit salad all the time. I remember eating lots of fruit as a kid. Is that enough for you, Jackson?
I'll start here. That's going to be good.
And so my mom lives around the corner from me now, and she still has this big yellow Tupperware that she would always, we call it her fruit salad bowl. But my mom just always really good at picking fruit that was really sweet and would always make fruit salads for different family events. And so, something I learned from my mom.
Yeah, now you're passing it on to your kids.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
All right, I'm gonna try this watermelon.
Yeah, I'm gonna start there. There's a good watermelon.
I have to give my husband credit. He actually used my watermelon picking tips, and he picked this watermelon out.
So it works. You don't have to be Debbie to be able to pick out a good
Exactly. You just got to have the tips.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say for it not being watermelon season, that's a pretty good watermelon.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I was really excited about the strawberries purely because they just looked so good. And they're living up to the hype here.
All right.
So Debbie, tell me this, as we are thinking about the series that we've been in, which is all about food and all of this kind of good stuff. What has been kind of standing out to you as we've looked at almost the connection between Jesus and food in the Gospel of Luke? What about that just even broader connection stands out to you?
So, the world we live in these days, status is really important, right? You don't necessarily get a seat at the table unless you have a certain, title or status. And with Jesus, I mean, he had all sorts of different people at the table that he was wanting to feed and invest in. And so that is something that's really been standing out to me. It's been really interesting each week to watch the different teachers unpack that process and just see the value that Jesus has for people and the care he has for people.
Yeah. And that is so interesting, so opposite to the way that God has designed or intended food or a meal to be.
Right.
That you have to, reach a certain status or prove your worth to get it.
Right.
It's it's a basic necessity that everybody needs. And so it is so us in our sinfulness and our pride that we want to make food exclusive.
Right.
When Jesus, like you're saying, he does such a it's just so interesting the way we want to set up a meal versus the way he wants to set up a meal.
Exactly.
He even says in the passage that we'll look at for this upcoming week's sermon to invite in the poor and the crippled and the lame because they can't pay you back. And it's like, that's so not a way that I plan a meal, right? I'm thinking about, I want to have my friends over, and I want to have people that I want to hang out with.
Those are the best entertainment.
Exactly. Like those are the things I'm thinking about, and that's so not what he's thinking about at all in that process. And I think this specific meal that we see, where you've got Jesus in a context with a bunch of kind of self-righteous guys who kind of think they have it all together. And then you've got this one lady who shows up, and she is just broken over her sinfulness and all of that. I mean, it's such a beautiful contrast in the exclusivity that these guys want to create. You know, we're the religious leaders, and then here comes this sinful lady, but she's really in Jesus's perspective, out of anybody there, she's really the only one who gets it. And Eric did a great job this weekend talking about how a huge crux of that is her humility. And I think that's a huge piece to anybody following Jesus. So as I think about that word though, humility, not a big one in our culture, maybe kind of a Bible-y word for some of us, like we wouldn't even really know where to start with that. What would you say are some things that you have, it's obviously weird to ask questions about humility, because to say where I've become more humble is inherently not humble. But how have you seen humility kind of grow and take shape in your life?
So I think for me, because you can't really chase after humility, right? As much as we all want it, right? And want to have that characteristic. It's not something you can chase after, but something we can do is really fight our pride. You know, when you fight your pride, the result of that is more humility. And so you know, for me, it's a daily thing of, you know, when I'm frustrated about something, or, you know, I'm expecting things to go a certain way, I have to really keep my pride in check. You know, do I really think that my opinion is the ultimate one, or things have to go the way I think? And I really just have to submit that to God and say, you know, help me to put my opinion, put my needs aside for what, you know, for what's best and for what you want. So fighting pride daily is probably would be my answer to that.
And I think so huge to even recognize our pride in the first place, because so often our pride goes so unchecked. Like I love what you're saying, like if we start to resist that, that's going to do well for us in seeing humility grow, because our pride just kind of, you know, our pride puffs us up to say, well, I'm just kind of better than everybody else. And so these are the things that I deserve.
It should be going this way.
And so that can so easily become not even a conscious thought, but a subconscious one. So what are some ways that if you're taking, a lot of our spiritual life is like kind of taking that subconscious thing and fighting it. How do you fight something that's subconscious? Conscious thoughts is like, that's its own thing of like, okay, that you'll recognize when you're thinking about that, I got to stop. But when you're dealing with something that's kind of a pattern subconsciously, where do you start?
You know, I think we have to trust that God's going to work that stuff out within us if we promise to seek Him and lay, you know, not my will, but yours, God. And we lay that down. Because He's the only person who's going to be able to transform our mind, right? And transform our hearts to be able to, you know, start thinking of not necessarily what's best for me, but what's best for, you know, what you have and what is your will. And so I think you know, I have to remind myself, you know, Eric talked about that this weekend, like there's a God and you're not God, you know? And so reminding myself of that regularly, and just seeing myself more as just like a vessel to do His work, you know, like there's not, what's the bigger picture here for my, you know, for my time on earth? What does God have for me? And it's not going to necessarily be what I'm, you know, think that agenda is, right? So I've got to submit to what God has for me and just trust that He's gonna hopefully through different circumstances work that out in my life. You know, humble me.
and I think it's very, like, one of the things that we probably don't do enough is I think it's very appropriate to say, man, I've recognized maybe a subconscious thought pattern that's not going to be beneficial. So Holy Spirit, would you help me to catch that? Like when that shows up, when I start thinking along those lines, would you not let that go unchecked anymore? Would you bring about some sort of like a conviction in me that would say like, whoa, that's, I was trailing down that.
I've even had friends say like, well, when you're bouncing that off of a good friend who you really trust to say like, no, I don't think that's totally accurate, and willing to let your pride down enough to hear that from people who love you. I think, can be really good too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I do think, obviously, whenever we are working to see our lives line up with Scripture, that is going to attack our pride because it takes humility to submit. But also, I think, to really even be transformed in following Jesus or in reading his word, one of the things is like you're going to have an accurate sense of who you are. And that's all humility is. Like we act like it's this like I got to hang my head low and I'm the worst and all of that. It's like, no, it's just thinking about yourself accurately. What's an honest estimation?
Knowing our place.
Exactly. Because the exact opposite was true of all of the other guys in the room in this story. And self-righteousness is, when you look at where self-righteousness comes from, it's so like obviously stupid. You take the best parts of yourself and you stack it up against the worst parts of somebody else. Like that's self-righteousness. Like that's never going to add up. You're always going to come out on top. And that's what those guys are dealing with. They're taking the best of themselves, stacking it up against the worst of this lady. Humility is just to say, man, who am I actually? Like, and those guys, if they were to take an honest estimation, there's probably plenty of things that they do well. There's also plenty of things that they're really not good at. And so taking that honest estimation is like going to lead us to a spot time and time again of like, Jesus, I need you and I need to be dependent on you. And I think what's so beautiful about this particular story is the lavishness with which she worships Jesus and loves him. And we even read that this ends up being kind of a point of contention for Judas down the line of feeling like this was wasteful and things like that. It kind of pushes him over the edge later. But I think it's such a beautiful image of what Jesus wants in our worship. So what would you say, like, as I think about lavishly loving God or being even emotional or passionate in our relationship with God, we can kind of get uncomfortable with that because we want to make it so intellectual and so kind of safe, and it feels really vulnerable to like be passionate or emotional. How could people who are kind of coming away from this weekend's message, how could they see maybe growth in that area or a willingness to embrace some of that kind of lavish love towards Jesus?
It can be easy for us to kind of compartmentalize, like, this is my Sunday, this is when I connect with God during the church service, and kind of or this is my devotion time in the morning. But I think being attentive to the Holy Spirit throughout the day and being responsive, I don't know, like sometimes I'll get like a push from the Spirit of like, you know what? Do this for somebody, and sometimes you're like, that's crazy. Like, really, you want me to do that? Like,
or it's like, I'm busy today,
or that kind of thing. But I do think, like, God has wired me in a way that I do love to serve people, but sometimes it's on my terms, like this is what I, where I can fit it in. And I do think being responsive to the Holy Spirit in the day-to-day creates just a more, just that consistent connection with the Lord, to be able to hear from him. And I think the more that we're obedient to that, even when it feels like this is out of my comfort zone, you're asking me to do this, the more that he then, connects with us in that way. So I'm not a super like, emotive person. Like when I worship in public settings, it just isn't something I grew up doing. But I do like to have that time on my own at home, even if it's turning on worship music first thing when I wake up in the morning. And I think that's even good for my kids to see. And, so sometimes I will have worship music going on and singing, and and I'm not a great singer.
I'm not either.
My friend Erin and I always say, like, if I could sing, I'd be really arrogant, because I would want to, be up in front of everybody, like how good I sing. So that's why God didn't give me that gift. So that's a way, even though it's at home where only my family can see me, that is a place that I do feel like I can show some of that emotion and thankfulness to God. So.
And I think so much of the emotion and the lavish loving of God, I think a lot of that happens in the quiet space. that tends to be the spot where that stuff happens. If it only happens in the public space, you're kind of getting into the zone of the Pharisees, you know, where it's like, where Jesus would point to these guys and he would say, don't be like them. They pray these eloquent prayers in public and then they don't talk to me when they're not in front of people. And I think embracing those quiet spaces, that's such a countercultural thing for us to pursue quiet and being alone with the Lord, because we're just, everything's full, everything's loud, everything's jam-packed. I had this experience recently. I've never slept with a sound machine before.
Oh, we always do.
Yeah, never had slept with a sound machine before.
We're on our 4th kid though, so.
Yes, exactly. Because now baby gets introduced to my life 8 months ago, and it was like, oh, we have to have a sound machine. And so he was in our room for a while, had the sound machine, and we bought him another one because we love the sound machine so much. We were like, we're sticking with the sound machine. And so first time ever traveling since then without the baby or anything, because if the baby's coming, the sound machine's coming. So my first time,
smart, Jackson.
Yeah, my first time traveling without him was to a men's retreat just a couple of months ago with my dad, and we're up in the woods and in this cabin, and I'm trying to sleep, and the silence is deafening. It is so overwhelming how quiet it is. And I was just thinking to myself, it's so interesting because I would not have thought twice about this up until 8 months ago when I started sleeping with so much noise, because the noise is what actually brings me peace. I think that's the feeling that we have when we are trying to enter into quiet space with God. There's all of this noise and there's all of this like overwhelmed feeling of like entering into silence, because noise is actually our peace and distraction is our peace. Instead of just like sitting vulnerably before the Lord in silence and having the faith to expect that he's going to show up, because if he doesn't show up and it's still noisy, we don't have to think about it too much. But you know, we put ourselves in such a vulnerable position when it's quiet, because what if he doesn't show up? And I think that's where we have to have faith that, and he's already here, and I'm the one who's slowing down to recognize that he's here.
That's good.
So I think that's a step for me. I want to get more comfortable there in those quiet spaces. And man, I think just a challenge though for us as we walk away to say, how could I find some of those spaces to like lavishly love the Lord? I think also I need to get way more comfortable with distraction and interruption. Because if I've got like, you know, I'll have my whole like tight little schedule going on and I've got to stay on rails with what I got to do. And it's just like what you were saying, if I get interrupted or distracted, it's like, I'm going to say no to that opportunity because I've got plans for today. And I think the same thing for our money is the same way, right? I've got plans for my money. There's an opportunity to give generously, to meet a need or whatever. And it's like, but I've already made plans. And so it's like, man, I got to get a little bit more comfortable, because I think people who are going to interact with Jesus in lavish ways, it's going to be because they have that margin, that ability to
and they're
embrace.
Responding. They can hear from him, right? And are responding to that invitation.
And willing to lay down their plans, willing to lay down their goals and say, let me be interrupted. Because I think that's something so beautiful about Jesus's character, is how willing he was to do this, to sit over food, how willing he was to be interrupted. So good goals, I think, for lots of us coming out of this. And Debbie, thank you for showing me your mom's fruit salad.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Big chunks. That's a new goal for me in fruit salad. I'm digging.
It won't get as like juicy and stuff like at the bottom if you have it in the big chunks. Yeah, then if you dice it up.
And it's just a mouthful, you know. It's perfect.
You gotta take some of this home to Sky. Pack it up.
I will. We never have enough left over when we've been doing this for our video guy either. And
we're gonna feed the video guy.
Yeah, he's gonna love it. So Tanner's gonna be thrilled. Hey, that's all we have for this week of Tangible Takeaways. I hope it's been a helpful conversation for you. Debbie, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Don't forget to like the video, maybe share it with a friend, and as always, subscribe so that you get updates about future videos as well. That's all we have for this week. We'll catch you guys next week on Tangible Takeaways.